Welcome back. This is another episode of the Shared Practices podcast. This interview impacted me directly, and I'm feeling the benefits today, and I'm excited to share this with you. Um, People know that I tend to be a self-help junkie, and there's a number of books I've read over the years, but one of them that has stood out to me more than a ton of the other ones is Getting Things Done by David Allen. And you'll hear in the interview how VitalSmarts and Getting Things Done are now connected. But it's something I've implemented, and every time I implement this system and I go back and I reread this book, I become a much more effective person. And every time I stop doing it, I think to myself, why did I stop doing that? So I'm using some of this COVID-19 time to tune up my system, revisit this, something that has worked for me in the past very well, but does require some effort. It requires some thought and some purpose. But when I do it, I get so much more done. So this is Justin Hale from VitalSmarts. I'm really excited that we got him on for this interview. It's powerful, it's applicable, and it'll give you, any of you who don't know what this system is, a good taste of principles that you can apply immediately. Follow that up with getting the book. Go get Getting Things Done, and follow Justin on One Productive Minute on all his platforms. So you'll hear some more about that in the interview. But here we go with Justin Hale. Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. We are in the midst of COVID-19. It's Good Friday. I'm fasting right now for betterment of everything that's going on. So if I'm a little bit slower than average on this interview, I apologize right up front. I am so excited for our guest today. This goes back. You guys have, if you've been following this season at all, you've heard a number of episodes from my dad, Murray Lowe. And he has used the materials of and worked with the company VitalSmarts now for years. VitalSmarts has been part of my life for a long, long time. And just recently we had Joseph Grenny on the show, one of the authors of Crucial Conversations. And I would say about a year, maybe 2 years ago, my dad told me, he said, hey, VitalSmarts is now building training for David Allen and Getting Things Done. And I got really, really excited when I heard this. I am a longtime attempter of this productivity system, Getting Things Done. And to know that my favorite training company that produces these amazing materials was then taking on one of my all-time favorite productivity systems and creating resources around that got me really excited. However, I haven't been exposed to any of it. I haven't gotten to consume any of it. So as Joseph Grenny and I had that interview and he started a series of webinars, one of the webinars was a productivity of how to get things done in a crisis, how to be effective despite all of our commitments and distractions. And Justin Hale was the one that was going to be giving this webinar. So Justin Hale is a productivity guru at VitalSmarts. He has a platform called One Productive Minute on Instagram, YouTube. Absolutely go check it out. There's a ton of free resources on the website. I think the overall website is vitalsmarts.com/one-productive-minute. And so when I heard that Justin has this platform, he's been published on Harvard Business Review, CNBC.com, Bloomberg, I was like, we have to get Justin on the show. And so very gratefully, you've agreed to come on the show. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thanks so much, Richard. Good to be here.
So how did all this come to be in terms of VitalSmarts, one of my, like I said, powerhouse of a company in terms of training actual actionable behavior change, making a difference in companies and in personal lives. How did that get married up, VitalSmarts get married up with Getting Things Done and David Allen?
Yeah. Well, the founders of our company for a long time were the ones who were creating the content. They were the ones who were out there doing the research, doing the consulting, writing the books, and that information and skill set that they were learning, we were turning into training programs. And as the founders started to retire, we thought, well, the mission's not done. We want to continue to provide the world with really great skills that can help them, improve their families, improve their organization, improve their community. And so what we decided we would do is shift our strategy to be less about us being content creators and more about us partnering with people who, like our original founders, have been out
Mhm.
there doing it, doing the research, doing the work, doing the writing. And so we started off with, actually, David Allen was our first partner, and who has this amazing track record of about 35 years of sitting next to some of the most powerful CEOs around the world, coaching them around being more productive and less stressed. And at VitalSmarts, one of the things we look at when we try to figure out who's the right partner is, one, we're looking for skills, behaviors, like you said, that people can actually do. And we're looking for things that they can use at work and at home. There's some skills, like accounting skills, would be very, very valuable for people, but may not necessarily be something that you would say has a huge impact on your marriage as much as it does your career. Maybe for
Right.
some people, I suppose, around tax season. But
Right.
we're
Right.
specifically looking for kind of these high leverage type of skills. And so when we were exposed to David Allen's skill sets around how do you get more of the right stuff done and prioritize, how do you be more present with work and family members, how can you be more of the person you want to be by doing the right kinds of things, we thought, wow, what a perfect alignment with our mission of giving people behaviors to change their lives and change the world. And so for me, I was one of the lead developers of that training program, worked directly with David Allen. And it was amazing because he's had all this experience, and I got to be mentored by him to say,
Right.
this is what I've learned. And oh, by the way, your job is to take what I've tried to learn the last 35 years and create a really engaging learning experience and take my message to the rest of the world. So it was a lot of pressure, but I took it on very seriously because it was a topic I just loved. And I'm sure we'll talk about this right now, but it just seems like, as life gets more complex, as the world gets more complex, the need to be able to just manage all the stuff that's overwhelming you is more and more important. So over the last 3 or 4 years, we've just loved that partnership with him, and it's been fun for me to lead out on the thought leadership of getting things done, representing VitalSmarts.
That's amazing. We're the context of this season of the podcast. We try and do deep dives on certain topics in certain seasons of our podcast. Is culture, leadership, and change. And I personally am in a few different leadership roles right now, and I have said many times I am the bottleneck. Like, I'm the bottleneck in practice setting and army setting and podcast setting on a lot of different things, and that affects not feeling like you're on top of things, not feeling like you have a control of your engagements and your commitments and you know what to do next. I feel like that affects your ability to lead, and that affects your ability for people to trust you, that when they send you an email or they ask you to do something or have their back, that something's going to happen, and that you care and value the things that you've said you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like this can feel like a personal productivity thing, but in my mind, it's directly correlated with your ability to lead and execute and get stuff done overall, not just individually, but as a group or as an organization, as a dental office. I think this definitely applies, and I would love your thoughts on how does leadership interface with personal effectiveness.
Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect example of how these skills are so much. Yes, they are. Yes, they are about productivity, but they're so much more about keeping your word to yourself,
Yeah.
to other people. It's about integrity. I like to say to people, these skills help bridge the gap between intentions and actual execution in your life. And by the way, that could be, as simple as, I'm a father. I'm trying to lead a family, and I tell my
Right.
family, don't worry. This summer we're going to do X, Y, and Z. My ability to be able to capture that request and agreement I've made, to be able to manage it, to be able to plan, to be able to execute on it, will tell my family whether they should believe me when I say I'm going to do something or not. And as a
Right.
leader running a practice, that's absolutely the case. You and I are making dozens of agreements to ourselves and other people every single day. And as a leader of a practice, you're making commitments to your folks at the front desk and to your techs and to the other people that are working for you. And if you're a partner in a dentistry, you've got other partners, other dentists that you need to make commitments to and promises to. And I think that a lot of us have great intentions, and yet we don't execute our intentions. We don't act on those intentions as often as we want to. And it's not because our intentions weren't pure enough. Have you ever forgotten something really important, like someone's birthday or an important event? And you often think to yourself, well, does that say something about my intentions? Do I just
Right.
not care about that person enough? And the answer is no, absolutely not. What you didn't do is what you did do is you trusted your mind way too much to remember
Mm.
that thing. And the basis of getting things done suggests this big idea, which is your mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. Even the most important things in the world, you probably shouldn't leave it up to your mind. It's okay that if you have a pretty good memory, but it turns out your mind is not built to remember and remind you. And so the more that you can externalize, so to say, all those commitments, whether within your dental practice or at home or with family or friends, the more you can externalize all those commitments outside of your head, we find the more likely you are to actually do them. Okay.
Mm.
And so it's a better sign of your intentions are your ability to be able to quickly capture all the commitments you've made and make plans for when you'll do something about them. And the best place to do that is not inside your head. That's one of the big insights that David Allen discovered many years ago.
Okay, well, let's start with that then. I feel like there's the thing with getting things done is that it's an overall system. It's got, components and steps and keeps you organized. And there's also some really specific principles. So sometimes I break down at the overall system. I'd say actually most of the time I fail to maintain my GTD overall system, and that's something I want to work on. But some of the individual principles I'll use on a daily, weekly basis and very much keep me sane. So you mentioned capture. Why is it so important to get stuff out of our heads and on paper? And what does that look like? Like, what do you mean by capture?
Yeah, this is the number one thing. If people only did one thing after listening to your podcast, I would tell them to do this, which is there's a practical piece around capturing and there's an emotional piece around capturing. So if you look at some research, there was some research done about 5 or 6 years ago at the University of Missouri where they were looking at active memory. And the question they were trying to answer is how much can a person's active memory actually hold? And active memory isn't memories from when you were a little kid. It's things you need to remember in the moment. I need to buy milk. I need to go run this errand. I ought to go email this person. Oh, by the way, I need to stop by so-and-so's office on the way back to my office. They found that your active memory can hold about 4 things, give or take 2. So those with really good active memories can hold about 6, and those with really bad active memories can hold about 2. But the average is about 4. So from a practical standpoint, what we know is that your mind isn't built for holding stuff. It's not an effective storage unit. It just was not made for that. So there's the practical piece of, look, it's not very reliable. So don't leave stuff in your mind that you need some attention on. David Allen likes to joke. He says there's often an inverse relationship between how much something is on your mind and it actually getting done. So it's not a good idea to keep stuff in your mind. And there's an emotional piece of it, which is every time you and I make a commitment, it's like an open loop. It's an unfinished agreement you've made to yourself and other people. And your brain is built to remind you again and again and again of that unfinished commitment until you finish it. Now, that wouldn't be that big of a deal if you only made 3 or 4 commitments, but you and I have literally
Right.
hundreds of agreements we've made to ourselves. Everything from I should buy more orange juice to I need to fix that fence to I need to call my client to I need to update my bank account to I need to file my taxes. Hundreds of agreements. And so picture this. Richard, if your brain is built to remind you over and over again of all the things you haven't finished and you have 200 of those things that are unfinished, imagine what that looks like for you day in and day out. Think about it emotionally and from a distraction standpoint and just from that annoying monkey in your brain saying, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, right?
Yeah.
The funny example of this is people wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh, I forgot to buy milk, as if you could do anything about it in that moment. And yet that's what your brain is built to do. It's built to remind you over and over and over again until you're done. Now, your brain is also pretty good about letting stuff go once you're done, but it is built to annoy you over and over again until you're done. And it thinks you should be doing that stuff all the time until it's finished. It doesn't say, oh, well, Richard's at work, so I'm not going to remind him about that personal thing. No. Your brain reminds you over and over and over again. So it's stressful. It's annoying to be reminded of all these things. Now, capture is a habit that suggests, look, never keep anything in your mind. You need to put your attention on. Your best practices. As soon as you have a thought of something you need to take care of, capture it or collect it someplace outside of your mind. And so that could be, by the way, very, very low tech. David Allen, the guy who wrote the book, he carries around inside of his wallet a little tiny pad of paper with a pen, right? It doesn't require Wi-Fi or anything like that. Anytime he has a thought, he captures it. Anytime he has an idea, capture it. Some errand I need to run, captures it. Because what it allows you to do is, one, he puts it in that little capture tool. And then once a day, he goes into those capture tools and he clears it out and says, okay, well, what is this thing I wrote down? And what is the next action I need to take to do something about it? And when am I going to do that action? So he could then put it on a calendar or put it on a list or whatever. But the point The point is he's captured it and he's trusted that where he's captured it, he'll see it later on. And so to your question, what is capturing? It simply means getting stuff off your mind that has your attention. Now, what we often ask people to do is, if this is new to you, start with kind of a first time capture event. We call it a mind sweep. And this can be as simple as, look, grab a piece of paper, grab a napkin, for heaven's sake, I don't care, and grab a pen and sit down for even just 15 minutes. And I want you to just write down everything that's pulling on your attention right now. Home, work, errands, personal, professional, projects, taxes, kids, anything that comes to mind that has your attention, get it off of your mind. And it is like magic. You would be amazed, by the way, what happens to people when they do this small thing. First, emotionally, many of them say, oh my gosh, it feels like this weight is off of my shoulders simply by capturing it someplace other than my mind. I hear other people say, wow, when I see it, I feel like I'm in control of it. Because here's what's happening right now with this COVID stuff that's going on. People are saying to me, Justin, I'm overwhelmed. I can't handle it. There's just too much. I feel like I'm going to explode. And I'll often ask, well, what's overwhelming you? And often people don't know what to say because all of the stuff that's overwhelming them is sitting inside of their mind like this amorphous bunch of stuff. And they cannot even see what's overwhelming them. If you can't see what's overwhelming you, you can't take control of it. And if you can't take control of it, you can't change it. You can't get rid of it. You can't even do it effectively. And so, gosh, it feels like such a duh for people, which is get stuff off your mind. But it has been transformative for hundreds, if not thousands of the people I've worked with, simply by taking a piece of paper, writing down everything that has their attention on a piece of paper, and they go, oh my gosh. Now, I will be honest, a lot of people say, I feel more stress. And so there's a little part of them that feels relief, but simultaneously a part of them that feels more grief. And why? Well, it's a natural consequence of being reminded that you've let yourself or other people down. Like I said, you've made an agreement that you haven't kept. And when you're reminded of that, that's stressful. It's not the volume that creates the stress. It's the violation of integrity, right? That I made a promise and I haven't kept it. And so the good news is, and people had somebody come up to me at a session once and say, well, you made me get it all out of my mind. And well, thanks a lot. It's more than I can handle. There's no way I could do all that stuff. And I said, well, let me flip this back on you for a second here.
You
and I said,
yeah,
I didn't. I said, did Justin make those agreements? They're like, no, he didn't make those agreements. I said, who made those agreements? They said, I made those agreements. I said, but here's the good news. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. The good news is, now that you see what you've agreed on, I bet you'll agree to less. And they're like, you know what? That's a good point. And that's one of the positive natural consequences, Richard, of doing a mind sweep, which is there's this word that starts to come to people's lips a little more often. It starts with an N and ends with an O, right? They start
I don't know that word.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Most people don't know it as well as they should. And so I like to joke with people, look, you can't say no, or you can't renegotiate commitments you don't remember you made, right? But once you get them out of your head, there's this amazing power that you realize, oh, I made these commitments and now I'm going to decide which of these I'm going to do. Maybe I need to go say no to some of these. Maybe I need to go renegotiate. And so simply doing that one thing, even if your listeners take 15 minutes. Now, if they really want to do it right, they should take 30 to 45 minutes and do a full mind sweep. Don't leave until you feel like everything in your personal, professional life is out on that piece of paper. And likely you'll probably get to somewhere between 75 to 150 things off your mind if you really do it well.
Yeah.
Yep. And that can be so freeing for people. So that is a long answer to the question of capture, but I really wanted to emphasize it for your listeners, because if they were to even stop listening right now and do that one thing, I promise it would be transformative for them. Now, the goal, of course, is don't just do it once a week, or don't just do it once a month, or don't just do it when you hear Justin talking. Every day, just be in the habit of when something comes to mind, get it off your mind.
Can I share the two different ways that I guess I've done it multiple ways. I've done the full on, every time I've reread Getting Things Done by David Allen, I'll do the full like mind sweep dump and just get everything on paper. But a lot of times I'll just show up at work that day and I'm like, man, I feel really overwhelmed. I've got a lot going on. And so I'll take out a piece of paper and write down everything I feel like I need to or want to do that day. Having it on paper in front of me, even though that just, for some people, that's just an obvious thing. For others, like, even though it's obvious, you don't do it. And so doing that at the beginning of the day and then being able to prioritize and say, I'm going to start here, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this. That simple action alone is huge on a triage of like what do I need to get done today?
That's right.
The other side of it is I've got an app that is my my home for getting things done. I happen to use OmniFocus, which is like the premium Apple dumb version of it that, has all the features, but it costs more and it syncs between my Apple devices, but not on my PC. Um, so I don't necessarily recommend that for everyone. I'm not trying to like tell everyone go get OmniFocus, but I have OmniFocus. And when I agree to something or someone tells me to do something or I think of something I need to get done, I try and put it in my inbox in OmniFocus to be able to do all of the other steps later on with getting things done so
Yeah.
that I have a trusted place. Even to the point now, I try and meditate on a daily basis and I'll do my morning meditation. Sometimes thoughts come up that are just thoughts, and that's okay. And that's part of meditation. Other time, thoughts come up that are things that I need to get done that I haven't captured. And it's really amazing. I'll stop my meditation, I'll capture that in OmniFocus and go back to my meditation. And all of a sudden it's way easier to sit there and focus on my breath
Yeah.
and work through other thoughts.
Oh,
It,
that's such a good illustration too. I mean, one of the things that's so funny about these skills is a lot of people think, oh, this must be for people who are just naturally all about to-dos and getting things done all the time and just go, go, go. But in actuality, so many of the people that are attracted to these kinds of skills and habits are some of the most creative people in the world, musicians and artists, because
mm,
what they're craving so much is what you just described. They're craving a clear mind. And
mm,
yet the problem is if you're an artist, you can't make a mess, so to say, if you're in a mess. And so they've been attracted to this idea of how do I get everything in the proper place and get my mind clear so that I can walk up to that blank canvas and have nothing else in my mind except for
mm.
painting a beautiful painting. And that's true for artists who want a clear mind to be able to think about lyrics and think about rhythm and think about all these different things. And so, getting it off your mind, yes, it does help you check the boxes, but in many ways, the larger, greater purpose is you have a clear mind to be present, to be focused, to mentally graze, like you talked about, and just think and consider and develop ideas or maybe just be present while you're reading your 5-year-old a book. I mean, I've got 4 kids, 6 and under, so I know all about this idea of
Right.
when I'm reading a book, I don't want to be thinking about those 50 unopened email. I want to be thinking all about Teletubbies or whatever it is. I want to be 100% focused on reading this book to my son, because whether you're meditating or writing lyrics for a song or selling marketing software, the more your mind is clear and the more present you are, the higher your performance will be. And I mean that very liberally.
And
I
that's
want, yeah,
we can bring that back to dentistry very immediately in the, focusing on the procedure that you're doing, focusing on the team member you're interacting with, focusing on the patient that you're interacting with. You can tell it's funny to be in a social situation with someone who is a little bit distracted and you're trying to talk to them. They're kind of like looking over your shoulder or they're distracted or they're checking their phone. There's a very different feeling to that interaction versus someone who is present with themselves and with you and is truly like locked on to you and what you've got going on. And if our patients can feel that, if our team members can feel that, if we can do a crown prep, not worrying about that bill that we need to cancel or change, we've got a trusted system so that between patients, okay, I put this thing down, I know I'm going to get to it later. That 100% allows you to be a better dentist and a better leader in your office.
Yeah, it's so true. And your quality goes up. And in many ways your efficiency improves the more focused you are on that task. And so absolutely, I think that with any of us, we're looking to be better performers. And I don't just mean in work. Yes, as a dentist, I want to be a better performer, but I also just want to be a better performer when it comes to being me. Right. I
Right.
want to be a better husband. I want to be a better neighbor. I want to be a better son. I want to be a better dad. And all of those are improved through a clear mind. It's not just
Mm,
some Zen thing, though it does improve those areas, but it
sure.
has a practical application. And it's amazing because the remedy to get there is simply by writing stuff down instead of keeping in your mind.
Okay, beautiful. So this brings me to a next. Probably one of the things that caused me to get into getting things done in the first place, which is I am a chronic procrastinator. I was diagnosed with ADD in high school. I've in college and dental school residency. I've been on and off medication and struggled to focus on the things that I need to focus on. And find many, many ways to procrastinate. And one of the things that I realized with procrastination is that if something feels nebulous or big, or I don't know where to start, then there is very little chance that I'm actually going to make progress on that thing.
Yeah.
And so a concept in getting things done that I think is immediately applicable is the idea of the next action. So describe for us what that is and why is it important to clarify next actions or to come up with next actions for things. And maybe someone's never even thought of that.
Yeah. This is so powerful. And I hope, especially as people think about, what they're dealing with right now with COVID-19, I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed too, to your point, because things seem so big. And one of the things that we like to say, and I love this saying, David Allen said, people tend to try to take on projects. Maybe, I'm home now and a big project I need to take on is I need to redo the basement. I want to clean out the garage. I need to, now that I'm home, we need to, a big project is figuring out who's going to take care of the kids and who's going to work when. And David Allen likes to say, you don't actually do a project. You do actions related to that project. Most people, if you look at their to-do lists, they're lists of big, vague projects. Their lists say things like mom or budget or bank or doctor or payroll, right? They say they have these high, like, and you look at it and sort of say, take example, something like mom. It's like, it's good historical data. You probably had one, right? But what does that even mean? And you say, well, what does mom mean? Well, mom's birthday's coming up. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Saying, well, what are you going to do about mom's birthday? Well, I need to send her a text and see if she wants to do a party. Okay, now we're getting someplace in terms of some actionable thing you can do to start moving forward. But to your point, most of the time people procrastinate and put stuff off, not because they lack the time, it's because they lack clarity. Clarity is the key to actually getting moving. Clarity is the key to getting humans to move. And the cool part is humans that are moving tend to stay in movement. When humans get going, they tend to stay in that movement. And so my goal is to how to just get people starting. And so what you need to look at is sort of say, if I'm putting something off, how can I better clarify that? And we like to encourage people to ask the question, well, what is the very next action? That's the next physical, visible activity you could do to at least start moving toward closure. Once again, you don't do a project. You don't do a revamp of the basement. You buy nails, then you call the contractor, then you hammer the nails, right? Those are the things that actually redo the basement. You don't do a project, you do actions related to a project outcome. So that's the first tip I'd give people is don't try to do big stuff. What is the very smallest action? And for a lot of people, I give them this tip and I say, hey, if you still have the action you think clarified, but you still can't get yourself to do it, I like to say, shrink it till you want to do it. Shrink it down to the smallest version of that action until you just fall into doing it. And so this plays out for me a lot as someone who writes a lot of articles is I will find myself putting off writing this article and I'll even say draft an article for blah, blah, blah. And it'll be fairly specific and clarified, but I still can't get myself to do it. And it'll hit my mind, shrink it till you want to do it, Justin. I'll say, okay, you know what? I don't know if I'm willing to draft this right now, but here's what I am willing to do. I'm willing to open up a Word document, name it, and I'm willing to just do that, right? Literally shrinking it down to as small as it gets. And I know it might seem silly to people, but it works. It absolutely works. And I think that what I find is that about 75% of the time, when I open it and name it, I end up writing at least one sentence to get it going. Or maybe I write an opening paragraph,
No, and this happened to me. This happened to me 2 days ago. I was feeling anxiety around a project that I had to do. And I was frustrated because it's like it's been on my to-do list. I know I need to get it done. Someone's depending on me. And I kept avoiding it. And I realized I was like, okay, take that anxiety as a data point and say, what am I not clear about on this project? And so I was like, okay, I don't have my next actions defined. It feels stressful and big. So my next action was open your laptop, connect to the VPN because I needed this on my government laptop, but don't open your email. So that was my next action was to turn on my laptop, connect to the VPN, don't open your email because as soon as I opened my email, everything else was going to pull me away. And that's what had been happening. And then I went further and I added some other next actions just in case I got like tripped up along the way. But for me, this concept of the next action of what is the smallest physical, tangible next step on a project is a procrastination buster for me in a way that when I do this, when I go through, when I capture and then I'll go back and I'll clarify later and I'll add next actions to a lot of these projects, I get so much done and it's amazing. And then later on, I think, why don't I do this all the time? Um, so,
Yeah, it's true. Humans' emotions tend to stay in motion. And I think to your point, you want to try to generalize that to your point. Why don't I do it in all areas of my life? Yeah. Why don't more people do it at the end of meetings? If we have huddles as a dentistry group first thing in the morning and we're getting ready for all the patients to come in, do we have a huddle? And if so, do people make commitments? And if they make commitments, what's the next action? When are we going to follow up? People need to do that more and more. Even when they get simple things like maybe you're talking to a customer service person on the phone and they say, we'll take care of this. I often like to say, well, I want to understand exactly is the action you're going to take and when am I going to hear back from you? And they might feel like that's kind of cheesy, but I want to be very clear about what you're doing so that I can hold you accountable to that thing. And so I think you're absolutely right. And, people could do this right now. The exercise that I suggested earlier with the mind sweep, if people did that while they were listening to this, grab one of those items from that mind sweep list you did on a piece of paper and simply ask yourself, if I had nothing else to do in the whole world except for to start moving on this thing right now, what would I go do? Would I go make a phone call? Would I send a text? Would I draft an email? Would I research something? Would I Google something? What would I watch you do if you had nothing else to do in the whole world except for to start moving on that thing? That's your next action. And I had a gentleman in one of my classes. It was so funny because he said, he was kind of challenging a little bit this idea that the next action is such a procrastination buster, like you said. He said, well, I have this action I need to do. And I said, what is it? He said, I've got this wall in my daughter's room that needs to be painted. I've been putting it off for months.
I just watched this. I'm so excited for you to share that.
Yeah.
I asked you to share it if you didn't.
And it's such a small thing, by the way, but it was a big deal for him. And he says, and by the way, I'll just say, I work with all these groups and I tend to ask, how many of you, when I tell the story, I said, how many of you raise your hand? If you have a wall in your house that you've been meaning to paint, I'm not joking. 50% of the people raise their hand, independent of where the group is or how large the group is. And so this is really relatable, I think, for a lot of people. He said, I've got this wall in my daughter's room I need to paint. I've been putting it off for months. And I said, okay, well, what's the next action? He said, I just need to paint it. And I said, well, why haven't you done it? He said, I just need to get the willpower to do it. And this is the kind of cycle that people get into, right? When they put stuff off is they blame themselves. They say, I must not want it bad enough. I must not have the motivation. And the blaming drives them into more procrastination. And so I said, well, let me challenge this for a second here. I said, do you have what you need to have in order to paint it? And he said, what do you mean? I said, do you have the paint? He said,
the supplies,
the stuff. And he said, not really. And I'm thinking, not really. You either have it or you don't, right? And I said, well, why don't you have the stuff? Why don't you have the paint and everything you need? And he said, well, I don't know what color it's going to be. And I said, okay, well, why don't you know what color it needs to be? He said, because that's not my decision. I said, whose decision is that? And he said, that's my wife's. And I said, okay, so what's the next action? He said, the next action is to text my wife and ask her what color she wants my daughter's wall to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm not joking. This guy's eyes lit up. His face gets all big and he realized, oh my goodness, I had been putting this thing off for months. And I'm not joking, Richard. In the first break, he walks out, he sends his wife a text. He comes back in and brags about it. I sent a text, right? Like he's done something amazing. And yet what you realize is so many of things that we are putting off can be broken down into almost like cranking widgets that we can do mindlessly. I'm not saying everything is that way, but there are so many things that we can break down to the point at which we don't need to have amazing willpower or amazing brains to do. He simply could go, send a text to wife, and boom, he is moving. And the guy wanted to leave the class and go paint the wall in that moment, go buy the paint and then paint the wall, because humans in motion tend to stay in motion. And so I can't emphasize enough, you're not the only one. This is so powerful for people to think about the next action. And by the way, I think that's so true right now with the COVID stuff. A lot of people are sitting there saying, X is happening to my business. I don't know what to do. X, we're running into this problem now. What do we do? And I tend to say, look, I know it's frustrating and some of us are dealing with some very sad, frustrating things. But what I will tell people is, if you find yourself in a place where you're moaning a little more than you'd like, or you're complaining a little more than you'd like, I would challenge you to ask yourself the question, what's the next action? Because we tend to complain only about things that we believe can be different than they currently are right now. And if they can be different than they currently are right now, some behavior is going to make them different than they currently are right now. So my question for you is, what's the next action? And I think that for many of us, and by the way, I don't mean to say that any problem in your life or sorrow is solved by the next action. There are some truly sorrowful things that require us to sit down and have some moment of solace and but even that at times, when you feel a sense of sadness for a family member, the question is, what's the next action? Is it
which
sending a text? Is it
which
reaching out?
I hate to bring in Frozen 2 here, but, I'm sure you've gotten this many, many times since you saw that movie. In the moment of grief, I won't have any spoilers here for those who haven't seen Frozen 2 at this point. But, Anna is in this extremely sorrowful moment, and she asks, "What's the next right thing to do?" And that's what gets her through, is just taking that next immediate step, one at a time.
Yeah,
So I think it does work even in the hardest moments, to look at, okay, this is hard, this is unfortunate, and I'm grieving, and what do I need to do? One step forward.
that's right. And I think that for people right now, especially, I'm sure a lot of your listeners who own their own practices, we have a good family friend who owns his own practice up in Oregon. Owns a, his wife is best friends with my wife, and she was just talking about when all this was happening. What are we going to do? This is our income. By the way, we have a payroll of people that work for us, right?
Yeah,
And so, at first there's this sense of throwing your hands up and going, "Oh my gosh, what in the world do I do?" And then to your point, the next question is, okay, well, what can I do? What could
right.
be a next action I could take to at least start moving towards something here? And it's amazing how much more productive, and I mean that in a positive way, how much more productive as humans we are when we ask that question. Someone in my local neighborhood had a small business, and this was all happening and the economy coming down. And she says, "What can I do?" And she shifts her business to go from making hats to making masks and medical uniforms and things like that. So it's amazing how it asking that question makes us a more productive uh, dentist, a more productive employee, but it also just makes us a more productive human, right? It just
Hmm.
makes us a more productive person. I had that even when I had a conversation that had gone bad one day with my wife, and I went to work that day and I was stewing all day and, oh, I wish she would do this. Why'd she say this? I wish she would change it. Like we've all thought before in our own
Right.
relationships. And I was finishing toward the end of my work day and I thought, okay, you know what? I'm still really bugged. But clearly, me thinking I want her to change is not going to change, right? Right,
Right.
and
Right.
that's probably not a good approach. And I just had this question hit my mind, Justin. Okay, what's one next action you could take when you get home? Because you can't quote unquote do a project. So I can't change my wife. What is one action I could take when I get home to start making the relationship better? Right.
Right.
And the thought came to my mind as soon as I walk in that door, the first dirty diaper I smell, I'm going to change it. The first piece of garbage I see on the floor, I'm going to pick it up. The first mess that I see, I'm going to clean it. The first dish that's dirty, I'm going to wash it. And I made that my next action. And what's amazing
Mm.
is people with the next action mindset are much better at owning problems, taking ownership, being proactive. It doesn't mean you take false ownership of more of the problem than is truly yours, but it means you tend to be a part of the solution. And I love that. So that next action is a mindset. It's having that next action thinking that can be so beneficial in all areas of your life.
Well, I love that rule, and it's been life changing for me. And every time I implement it, I realize I need to do this more often. Um, I'm thinking one more skill that is immediately implementable for someone who's kind of new to these concepts. I was thinking the 2-minute rule, but I don't know. Is there anything else that you would put first over the 2-minute rule in terms of immediate utility?
No, I think that's really great. I think the 2-minute rule is really excellent. We could talk about that, but also one other tip we can talk about is finding some clever ways to organize your to-do list so that
Mm.
you're able to get more things done in a shorter amount of time, and also you're able to do more of the right stuff in the context that you're in. So we can
Okay.
talk about that as well. But let's start with the 2-minute rule. What's so great about it for you? How's it been helpful for you? I'd be curious to know.
So the idea of the 2-minute rule is part of getting things done is once you've captured all of these commitments that you have and all of these things that are nagging at you and you need to get done. Um, at some point, you need to clarify some of those. You're not going to be able to get all of those things done at once. Oftentimes, it's a huge list, and so you're having to clarify. And some of these are actually full-blown projects, but some of them are things that take less than 2 minutes to do. And especially if they're a next action on a bigger project that really you have to do one little thing for that to get kicked off and get rolling. And there's one little thing up front. So the 2-minute rule is anytime an email or an item on your list takes 2 minutes or less to do, rather than turning it into a project, rather than kicking it down the road and procrastinating it, or trying to delegate. Just get it done. Just get those 2-minute things that take less than 2 minutes done. Um, and that is a very powerful way of kind of managing some of these lists and the feeling of overwhelm that your email can give you, or that having all these outstanding obligations give you.
Yeah.
And for me, this is where now we're getting into the part of getting things done that is the hardest part for me, which is taking the capture and processing that big list, turning them into projects, clarifying your next actions, and then reviewing this on a weekly
That's
basis.
right.
Um, I get to the point very often where my OmniFocus capture inbox feels just as stressful as my other 3 emails. I've got my Army email, I've got my podcast email, I've got my personal email, and I've got my OmniFocus inbox. None of them are anywhere close to zero. Um, and so feeling overwhelmed by all of those lists is something that I sometimes struggle with. But the 2-minute rule is a great way to deal with some immediate things and get some traction and get some momentum. Have
Yeah.
I talked about it the right way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that 2 minutes really is an efficiency cutoff. We find that when you're clarifying things in your inbox, email, or even just a mind sweep list that you did, as you're going through each one, you're asking yourself the question, what is this? What does it mean to me? Is this garbage? I should throw it in the trash. Is this something I want to file away for reference? Put it in a reference folder. Is this a book I need to put on my bookshelf? Put it on the bookshelf. That's the idea of clarifying. To your point, if there are things that you come upon that you say, oh, I need to take an action with this, and you say, well, the action is going to take me 2 minutes or less, we suggest you do it in the moment, that it would take you more time to take that item, put it on a list or a calendar to do later, come back to it, manage it, than it would be to just do it in the moment. Now, it's important to kind of stick with around 2 minutes-ish.
This is hard.
That's right. When people start clarifying their inbox, they often will say, oh, this item that I'm reading has an action. It would take me about 8 or 9 minutes. I'll just knock it out right now. And then what ends up happening is they end up doing 5 or 6 of those 8 or 9 minute things, and they've only gotten through 5 emails. And so then what happens? If you do that as a habit, then you end up getting a massive backlog of email and you never get through it all. And so what I suggest to people is I say, when you're in clarifying mode, and by clarifying mode, I mean reading each item you've captured, deciding what it means to you, and then parking where it belongs. When you're in clarifying mode, you're not in working mode. You should not also be in the mode where you divert your time for 30 minutes to go do something, to go do some long action. But items that are 2 minutes or less, you should probably just knock them out in the moment. There's also a sense of motivation there that's nice. But don't go down these rabbit holes of 5, 6, 7, 10, 15-minute projects or actions. Then you end up finding you never get to the bottom of those buckets, those inboxes. Your inboxes perpetually stay overflowing. And so for me, it's like a race. There's time during my day when I'm working on focused work. And during the time when I'm doing that focused work, guess what I'm not doing? Processing my inbox. I'm not clarifying. Vice versa is true. When I'm in my inbox processing my email, guess what I'm not doing? Focused work. Okay. And so when I'm in my inbox, I have one focus. It's like a race to zero. My focus is, how can I clarify all of these down to zero as quickly as I possibly can? Not because zero is the end game, but because once I get current, at least as close to zero as possible, once I get current and everything's been clarified and parked on a list or parked on a calendar, clarified to clear actions, put in a file folder, trashed away because it's garbage, the sooner I can get clean, the sooner I can see a full landscape of everything I could do, a full inventory of everything I could do. And then here's the good part. I end up doing more of the right stuff. People don't understand this. They say to me, I don't know how to prioritize. Where do I spend my time, Justin? I want to do more of the right stuff. And the problem is they don't have a full inventory of everything they could do in front of them. And so they don't know what to compare. So they know they're doing something that's right and not doing something that's wrong. But when you capture everything and you take a couple of segments during the day to clarify all that stuff down to zero as close as you can, and all those things you've clarified are now parked in appropriate places, you can step back and you have what we like to call an orientation map of everything in front of you. I can look at my calendar, I can see my list, and I'm oriented to what I could do. And then the cool part is you can follow your intuitive hunches and energy and time to do whatever you want to do. Most people feel like the nail, not the hammer, when it comes to their productivity. And when you can process that stuff more regularly and have a full orientation map, you become the hammer. You're now in control. you're not run by your stuff. You are running the game. Problem is most people don't capture stuff. They don't clarify it regularly. So they don't have full orientation maps. So they're running off of, imagine trying to hike a trail and your map is half complete. That's what people's day-to-day productivity looks like. And so to your point, it's so important to be clarifying, AKA processing this stuff regularly. And you're only going to process efficiently if you're doing nothing else.
And I think you've just clarified for me where a major failure point in my relationship with getting things done, which is when I start to go through a list of whether it's emails or a list on my phone, I get pulled into items and I say, oh, this will take 2 minutes. And it's not a true 2 minute rule thing. Or I get just pulled into something because I feel guilty because I'm behind on that thing. And rather than continuing to clarify, I go off on that side tangent and therefore never feel clear
Right.
about everything.
That's right.
Um, so, obviously we can't get into the full, everything, in the time that we have today. And this has been immensely helpful. Where are some places that people can go if they want more resources for becoming more productive, for getting things done, for implementing this in their life? What can they do?
Yeah. So easy. I mean, one of the things I would love is I hope people will follow me online, One Productive Minute on Facebook,
Perfect.
Instagram. The goal of that is every day you can get one quick tip that takes you less than a minute to consume. And it's a lot of the stuff that we talk about here. And it's just a great way to get kind of some value, so it's kind of dripped on you each day, just a little bit so that you can use it right away.
Which is the things that we should have in our Instagram feed.
That's right.
Like that's the kind of stuff that, like, if I could design an Instagram feed of just like pure uplifting, helpful things,
That's right.
that's really what I want, but I can never get there.
So that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Make it practical. Here's some tips. The other thing that people should think about doing is, hey, the book is excellent to be able to get that. The book is like a workbook. It's really practical. And what we spend a lot of time doing is creating great educational experiences. So attend a training program, whether it's an online training program or virtually, especially with things going on with COVID. We upped a lot of our live virtual courses, or when all of this finally finishes or cools down and a lot of us are able to get back out again, go to a face-to-face training. People can go to VitalSmarts.com and sign up for a GTD course. One of the things too, I'll send you, Richard, is I've got a small handful of family and friends subscriptions to our online on-demand version of Getting Things Done. So let me hook you up with that. We'll make sure you can get on that because reading the book is great, but let's get you in a course so you can advance your skills and make you a pro. And the next time you'll be able to give the version 2 of this podcast all by yourself.
No, I'd love that. Absolutely. Well, this was fantastic. I've got the chance to peruse the 1 minute, all of the different ways you can interact with 1 minute, one productive minute, 1 minute. So highly recommend people reach out, get the book, go to VitalSmarts.com, look at these trainings. You're never going to regret investing in yourself and becoming more skillful around the commitments so that you can pursue the life that you truly want. So thank you for coming on the show. This was a ton of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
Take care. We'll see you.
See you guys.
Okay, I hope you guys caught a glimpse of that. So there's two camps here. There's people who are in the getting things done camp already. You've read the book, you've implemented this in some form in the past. You probably want more. If you want more, VitalSmarts has a ton more. And I'm currently going through their course on getting things done, and it's amazing. I'm picking up a lot of little things because even though I've done this in the past, I've read the book multiple times, there's some subtleties to it. And how to incorporate this long term. And I'm working on that right now. I've cleaned out my inbox. I'm going through all this stuff. I talked with Justin offline, and then I've been going through the course. So really great educational opportunities there on VitalSmarts.com, as well as One Productive Minute. And then if you're new to all of this, this really is worth a read. And it might feel overwhelming when they talk about this like true mind sweep in the book. But reading Getting Things Done and figuring out which principles or how deep you want to dive into this system, no matter what, you're going to come out the backside more effective. Whether or not you drink the Kool-Aid and you're all in on GTD or not, the principles are true and this works. And I really, truly believe that your effectiveness as a leader depends on your ability to keep your word, also to manage your commitments, your projects, and your ability to say no. And how do you know that you should say no to something if you don't have a good grasp of what you're already committed to and how much time that's going to take and your resources available. So I am back in deep since this interview. Like I said, I've spent hours watching, reading, implementing, and have been able to see progress. It's been better, and I'll update you guys as I go. But it's a journey. I'll say, you want to be instantly better at this kind of stuff, but we know that real change takes time. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Please reach out to Justin if you found this helpful at all. Follow him, comment on his videos, on his Instagram page, whatever. If you let him know that you heard his interview, that would mean a lot to me. So also thanks to everyone who's left us reviews on iTunes. We now have cleared 400 5-star reviews on iTunes. Thank you so much. I know that not everyone uses it on iTunes. You listen lots of different places. However, that's a great benchmark when we're talking with advertisers and people who could sponsor and support the show to prove that, like, hey, there's actually people listening and they find this valuable. So thank you so much for everyone who's taken the time to leave a review, who's joined us on our Facebook group, who's downloaded the resources and gotten on our email list. We really, truly appreciate you all. So we will talk with you next time on the Shared Practices podcast.